What's up everybody, it's me Jeremy. We love finding Rioter comments that tease things that might be coming out in the future, new champions, new skins, all that good stuff. And champion design is pretty hard when you're trying to be at least somewhat original with every new kit, but Riot does keep finding new abilities and new mechanics to try and bring into League of Legends. And it's super cool to find out them before they actually do make it into the game. So we can try to figure out what champions that these future abilities might suit best. I personally love trying to predict these future things. I mean, just recently, Project Katarina got announced, which I honestly completely predicted in a video about a month and a half ago, and I'm super happy about that one. And besides, I mean, these predictions are honestly kind of obvious when you actually boil down to the details, so here are our favorite ability concepts that Riot themselves have said they want to find a place for in the game in the future. And with that said, let's get started.
Hey Jeremy!
Pansar Dragon? What the heck are you doing in my video, man?
Jeremy, I was wondering if you could help me out with something. I'm really bored and I need something to watch.
You're always distracting me, man. You gotta stop. Anyway, have you thought about watching anime?
Yeah, I love SpongeBob.
Come on, man. That's not really an anime. Real anime is something you watch on Crunchyroll.com. They're the best place on the internet to watch anime by far, with 1080p super fluid quality, great subtitles, and with no advertisements.
Wow, that sounds super awesome, but too good to be true. It's probably really expensive.
Well, actually, if you sign up at crunchyroll.com/Jeremy, you can get 30 days of Crunchyroll absolutely for free to try it out. I personally have been using Crunchyroll for almost 3 years now, actually, since before I was ever sponsored. So now that I actually am sponsored, I'm super excited to show them to you guys. And now finally, without further ado, let's get back into the video. Alright, first up we have an ability called Resuscitate, which would basically make use of all of the dead bodies lying around in League of Legends. Riot Gypsy Lord pitched this idea as something he was playing around with for a made-up champion called Blair, and the ability would dissolve Blair into a cloud of insects and teleport her to a nearby minion or champion corpse. Blair would then eat that corpse to heal herself, which is kind of crazy to think about, and what makes this ability seriously ridiculously awesome is the next part though, which is that Blair would be able to cast this after she had died on a champion corpse to revive herself. Any Resuscitate ability would be kind of based on the idea that the champion could bring themselves back to life. And although that is, kind of broken to think about, it's also insanely cool, and there's nothing like it at all in the game at the moment. It would of course be super hard to balance a champion that could literally just come back from the dead by themselves on a press of a button, but it would be limited by having dead corpses nearby to use, so I mean, maybe it could actually work. The design of having a way to interact with corpses in the game, either champions or even minions, is seriously awesome, although getting bonus effects like maybe a resurrect after you had already killed an enemy champion would be a pretty snowbally ability, and I mean the rest of the champion kit would have to be a little bit weak to compensate, but who knows, they could definitely find a way to make it work. A fan question to Riot Gypsy Lord gives us another sneak peek at a potential new ability. They asked what his thoughts on a champion with resource manipulation were, and Gypsy Lord said that some kind of mana or energy manipulation would be a really cool strategic place for a champion to exist in the game. The old Soraka Infuse was an example of this. She used to be able to give mana to her teammates, but although a few people found it really cool, it was also really dangerous territories, because the thing is that there's a lot of champions that kind of just become flat out broken with that much mana at their disposal. But another cool but risky mechanic would be affecting other resources, stuff like maybe the rage bars of champions like Gnar. Those resources are kind of made to act like timings where a champion can temporarily unleash their full power though, so messing with that could potentially have pretty big consequences. Whether it's a new ability that lets you channel mana to an ally, or maybe gives you the power to give Tryndamere a full fury bar instantly, resource manipulation abilities are really crazy, but might actually end up finding a way into League of Legends in the future based on what Riot Gypsy Lord said, and they could range from being extremely mild to just absolutely powerful. It's not really that much of a surprise that Riot hasn't done that much with these kind of effects yet, since it is kind of a risky territory for design, but they could definitely find a fair and balanced way to do it, and we might potentially expect to see something similar in the future. Another requested ability was for a ricochet type effect that could actually bounce off of terrain instead. Riot Ezreal actually mentioned that this was something that they had tried to make work internally before, but it had quite a few problems at the time. First up, it was just really hard for the player to figure out where the shot was going to go because most walls on Summoner's Rift aren't really smooth and flat, they're kind of curved, so bouncing things off them is kind of complicated. It would also need an extended range after a bounce, or you would just run into issues like a max range skill shot bouncing off of a wall and then barely traveling anywhere afterwards and just failing completely because the range had run out. An ability that bounces off of walls like that probably isn't that likely then, but Ezreal did say that Riot had found a super cool way to do a similar type of ability, but just hadn't found a character that it fits yet. A ricochet type ability that bounces off of walls would be seriously awesome to see in the game, but it would need a ton of skill to be used properly, and both mechanics and strategy would come into playing to land a spell that changes direction like that. Riot did eventually release Vel'Koz with his own kind of direction changing ability in his Q, but we've still yet to see something that actually interacts with terrain, so I definitely don't count Vel'Koz's Q as the ability that Riot Ezreal is referring to. The next ability is something that could be absolutely insane, probably my favorite in the entire video, and the idea is to try and make an ability kind of like the shock rifle from Unreal Tournament. For those of you that haven't played Unreal Tournament, it's basically an instant hit weapon with pinpoint accuracy that really rewards you aiming well with it. It has a very small hitbox, but does an extremely large amount of damage and just fires instantly. More often than not, you're just going to miss it because the hitbox is really small and it's a very fast-paced shooter, and you get into this crazy mind game scenario going where the enemy's desperately dodging and you're desperately trying to line up the shot perfectly, and if you're super pro you can just land it and you just kill them and it's awesome. And there's also this awesome combo where you can use the secondary fire of the weapon to kind of launch this orb of energy sort of thing that's really slow moving, but then you could actually shoot the orb, which makes it explode, destroying anything near the explosion. And a fan on the forums took a shot of coming up with an idea of how the shock rifle ability could work in League, kind of basing it off of the shock combo effect, where you charge up a passive that would discharge itself after a set number of basic attacks, and you could put down a shock core and then attack that shock core for a slow on nearby enemies. Ezreal mentioned about the fan concept. While that version was pretty cool, what he really liked about the shock rifle ability concept was the skill requirement in aiming the actual effect, and suggested something like maybe a randomly spawning projectile that you had to actually hit mid-flight to get the ability to work. We've never seen anything like this one in League before, but it's a seriously awesome idea that would be a sweet fit for maybe a technology kind of themed champion. There would definitely have to be some sort of setup involved, whether it's firing off a projectile first or positioning yourself to use one that spawns randomly, so that you could hit it with the shock rifle ability. It would be a pretty high skill cap effect to use, of course, but stuff like that is super fun and rewarding to use for players, so hopefully we'll see it in the game eventually. Our next ability is the one on this list that is probably the most likely ability to actually make it into the game. One ability that Riot specifically wants to completely change that we know in the past is of course the ultimate of Yorick. A ton of different reworks were proposed and we talked about them in some previous videos, but one ability that really stood out during the talks on Yorick's rework was an ability, his ultimate, that would just spawn a crap ton of ghouls, like 10 or 12 or so. Yorick is confirmed to be getting a new ultimate in the rework, we know this from Riot quotes, and this is the most likely candidate to replace it. The problem with Yorick's current ultimate is that it's very reliant on his teammates for it to be successful, or oftentimes it's just super underwhelming if you use it too early or if you don't get a full benefit out of it, and it's just something that is going to change for sure. In their talks in the past, Riot did bring up a bunch of different new types of ultimates, but the ultimate of spawning just a bunch of ghouls was something that Riot Zelnath especially, who was mainly working on the Yorick rework, drew to a lot, and as a result I think it's definitely the most likely effect for the candidate for the new Yorick ultimate. For our next one, we're looking at more of just a type of an ability. We've seen a lot of utility-based ultimates on carries recently, in the form of Kindred especially, but it's actually very likely going to happen again in the future. Riot Rex mentioned that utility ultimates feel super good on carry classes, because it's a very unique effect rather than just being, another damage ability on steroids. Games where you're behind and struggling to be useful really sucks on those types of carries because your ultimate feels useless since it just does damage. But with utility in the kit, you can still be useful and have some sort of benefit for your team even if you get stomped in the laning phase. Kindred is a fairly snowbally champion, which would usually really suck if you were behind, but because of her ultimate, you can play a lot more defensively with poke and focus on keeping your stronger teammates alive instead. Talia is of course another example of a recent carry with a utility ultimate, so it's definitely looking like that's probably just the new trend, that Riot wants to keep developing abilities that complement a carry's strengths, while also giving a backup plan in case the game is going pretty badly for you. I mean, we've kind of seen this on Rise too, actually. League is already full of damage-based ultimates anyway, so it's going to be super cool to see some new and interesting designs for carries that have that sort of utility focus instead. Last up is an ability unlike anything we've ever seen before so far into the game. Riot Xenon was asked about an ally attach ability, kind of like Mina's W in Dawngate, but for those of us who haven't played Dawngate, it's an ability that lets her attach to an ally and shields them, but then she's also allowed to leave the host to deal damage at a target location when she rematerializes. Riot Xenon mentioned that Riot would probably, almost certainly, do some kind of ally attach ability in the future, because the design space is something that's just really unexplored so far in League of Legends. It would be super unique. He also mentioned Abathur from Heroes of the Storm, someone that more of you have probably seen before, so it's quite likely that Riot have been looking for a way to put out a more unorthodox champion into the game with abilities that really change the dynamic of how the game is played for that certain champion. To make it work in League of Legends, it would definitely have to be different from Mina or Abathur, but there's endless possibilities to making sort of an attach ability work. Riot would probably have to develop an entire champion around the concept to make it feel right and get the proper synergy, you know, but it'd be super cool to see that shapeshifter champion with the power to merge with a teammate in the future. We've talked a lot about the potential for that sort of shapeshifter champion in League of Legends in the past, but we still haven't seen the archetype explored by Riot yet, so we're still holding out for something like this one day. Anyway, we'd love to hear what you guys thought about the abilities on our list and what champions you think they would maybe suit best. So definitely let us know in the comments below, and looks like that's going to be it from me. If you enjoyed the video, definitely subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you guys next time.